All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our first face-to-face meeting of the Corporate Parenting Committee. It is really lovely to see you all. My name's Councillor Yvonne Williams. I'm chairing this meeting today. Just to say welcome, it's so lovely to see you all in person. I get really excited. This week I've got 3 in-person meetings and I am so excited. It's just been brilliant. So it's so lovely to see you. What I'd really like to do, traditionally in corporate parenting meetings, our young people asked me 4 years ago if we could do some icebreakers because we didn't know anybody. Our young people felt really conscious of being in a really kind of boring meeting, so we agreed to do some icebreakers, and we haven't done them while we've been doing the team meetings, but I'm going to put you all through it today. So I do apologise. So as we go through the introductions, what I'd like you to do, we've just had the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games, so I would really like you to think about, if you could, and all things being equal, you could be in the Olympics or the Paralympics or indeed go to the Winter Olympics, what sport would you be? What would you represent? And if you want to just add a little bit about why, you can. If you don't want to, don't worry about it. So I'll start. Mine's very simple. Mine would be tobogganing because I can sit down, enjoy the race, hopefully stop at the end, but have some really good fun while I'm doing it with the teammates. So I'd really love to do that. So if we go around the room, introduce yourselves and tell us what sport you'd like to do. So I'm going to start this way and go around that way, if that's okay. Sorry to just stop you. You know, when you're speaking, if you want to put your microphone in front of you, just press the middle button. Lift it up. That's it. Press the red button. That's actually on mine. Brilliant. Sorry, I asked you if I mentioned something with that one.
Kaiser, I'm Head of Specialist Services. In terms of Olympic event, probably decathlon, a bit of jack of all trades, like doing a bit of everything. So, there you go.
Hello everyone, I'm Fiona Coltman, I'm Head of Early Help Services in the city, and if I was at the Olympics, I'd like to do skateboarding because it's different and new, and I like new things.
Hi, I'm Kelly Allman, Deputy Head of Service for Early Help, and I would like to do the BMX thing, to go upside down and do some loops. Fearless.
BMX, did you say?
Yeah.
It's green. I don't know if that's working or not.
Yeah, Andrew's
Okay. I'm Judy Levitt, I'm the Deputy Head of Service for Fostering. If I was in the Olympics, I would do the synchronised dive. I wouldn't be able to do it at all. I can't dive. But I just think it looks really good fun and it's teamwork and working together, and I love the way they just end up sploshing in, just completely together.
Hi, I'm Marlene Upchurch. I'm the chair of the Foster Carers Association. Oh no, you've got me on the hop here. The only thing I can really do is hula hoop. Something that would have to be my thing because I'm useless at anything else.
Hello, I'm Councillor Paul Hazelgrave, and I'm the Vice Chair of this body. I think having been kicked off the tobogganing team, because that's what came straight into my mind after seeing Cool Runnings, I think I'd want to be a decathlon. Basically because I'd be equally incompetent in all the skills, but it'd be great meeting different people. I'd meet more athletes that way than any other activity.
I'm Priya, I'm the Deputy Youth Mayor, and I'd pick football because girls can play football too.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Sue-Ann Lim. I'm the Director of Early Help and Children's Social Care. So if we are on this sort of fantasy journey, I think I would actually introduce ballet. because I always wanted to do ballet as a child and never was able to. So I would introduce ballet and have that as my Olympic sport.
Chair, the only sport I was reasonably good at was volleyball, but I don't know whether that is part of the Olympics or Paralympics or whether... Is it? Yeah. That would have been my favourite one to try.
Hiya, is this working? Oh, everybody hear me? I'm Laura Bradley. I am the Participation Officer for Children in Care within the Council, and mine's a bit of a fantasy one as well, so I ride superbikes and go on track with them, so I think I'd introduce that, I think.
I am Jo Groombridge from Change Grow Live Senior Advocate, and I think I'd like to do the ski jump. I've always watched it, and I think it would be just, I don't know, real adrenaline thing. So. A bit scary, but yeah, I'd like to do that, yeah. Brilliant. Okay.
Hiya, Kelly Buswell from Change Grow Live. I'd like to do, obviously, a 3-day eventing. Because that would be amazing. I've got horses, but I'm nowhere near at that level. But it would just be amazing to do that. So, yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Hey, Councillor Kirk Cuss. Being a football fan, I would have to pick football.
Can I do the bobsleigh? The one-person bobsleigh. That's what I would really love to do. Really fast, jump in, and down at the bottom. It's all over, painless, done.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you joining in with that icebreaker. I hope you've had a little bit of fun there. And I'm going to also give you a very useful fact for the day, which I have to say thank you very much to the education team, because did you know that September is the only month to have the same number of letters in its name as it has in the month? And now you're all going to go through, aren't you, counting? Because I did this morning when I read that. I just want to start that off. So thank you very much for that. The theme of the meeting today is safety. So without further ado, I'm going to crack on with the agenda. We're not expecting any fire alarms or anything, so if one does crack off, if you can make your way safely to the exits. They do ask us in here to follow a one-way system, so unfortunately, if you do need to go to the loo, unless you've got a dispensation, if you could come to forward, walk round the back and out that door, and then round back on yourself to the toilets, they're out the back there. They also ask us if you can wear a mask if you do have to get up and move around. And again, unless you've got exemptions, please don't worry about it. But if you could try and follow those guidance rules, we'd really appreciate that. Thank you very much. So I think I've covered all of that off. Is that okay? Yeah, brilliant. So if we can take apologies then, please, Lindsay.
We've got Councillor Patterson, Heather Peat and Andy Smith. They've all sent their apologies.
All right, thank you. Do we have any more apologies from the floor? Right. Thank you. Any late items to be introduced by the chair? I don't have any. No more from me. And any declarations of interest, please? No? Fabulous. So, the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of April, hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look at them. If we can take them for accuracy first, does anybody have any matters of accuracy that they'd like to raise? Are you all happy for me then to sign them off as a true and accurate record? Yeah, great. And if we can just take the matters arising in them then, in our pre-meeting we went through any of the actual items that needed actioning, and I'm glad to say and report that they have all been actioned. So unless there's anybody wants to raise any issues as matters arising on there, I'll move us forward if that's okay. You all happy with that? Excellent, thank you very much. So we're going to do a little bit of rearranging of the agenda in a little while, but first of all, the next item on the agenda is our Children in Care Council update, and I'd love to introduce Laura to take this for us. First of all, Laura, welcome to the meeting, and I hope you found the first couple of months of your time with us really helpful and useful, so please take it away, the floor's yours.
Okay, so hello everybody again. Thank you for having me. Obviously, I haven't been to one of these meetings before, so I do apologise if I'm a bit stumbly. So yeah, I'm Laura Bradley. I started in April with the authority. I need to firstly apologise that we haven't got a young person with us here today due to school and college commitments with it being in term time, but we are meeting tomorrow night. And we've got on the agenda to discuss about moving forward how we ensure there's a young person that can make every single meeting with us here. So firstly, I'll start with the beginning of the report. So this was the one, obviously it's slightly out of date now, isn't it? But there's been 3 virtual meetings since the last report, which was April, May and June. This report highlights the work the Children in Care Council have been doing, what is important to them and how they impact on services. It also explains the challenges they face, which Corporate Parenting Committee may be able to help with. So at the meeting in April, I introduced myself as the new participation officer, as that was my first contact with the young people in the meeting. And we spoke about undertaking a new drive to encourage new members to join us. So we had a discussion on the young people's thoughts on how we might engage more young people and increase numbers to the group. The Deputy Head of Service for Children's Quality Assurance presented the Derby City Council Diversity and Heritage Pledge for Looked After Children, which at that point was in draft stage. And again, the Children Care Council members had discussion and gave feedback on their thoughts around that. Within the May meeting, we did a wellbeing and mission statement for the group, just as a sort of safety measure for members and ensure that while we have the meetings, everybody is safe and well looked after. So I drafted that and took it to the meeting, and we went through any changes that we wanted to go through with that. We also spoke about the Big Ask survey, which did close that month. So I explained that to the young people, what it was about, and later on sent a link to all the members, residential homes, and early help and social care service managers, asking to disseminate and encourage participation with this. We also discussed the Children in Care and Care Leavers Consultation, which was due to close in February, but it was extended to the 31st of March because of the uptake on it. So this went out to internal and external foster carers, DCC children's residential homes, care leavers, supported accommodation providers, young people remanded in custody. There were 50 responses in total, 43 were children in care, 6 were care leavers, and 1 didn't specify. One of the questions were about Derby City Council and asking how they felt they were kept informed by the local authority at the beginning of lockdown. 71% felt okay, good or excellent. There are other statistics through there mentioned in the report if you want to go through those. Moving to the June meeting, I created and presented a PowerPoint presentation detailing the services which affect children in care. This was to generate a discussion around topics that the members would like to cover that are important to them. The following 3 topics were highlighted by members: leaving care with regards to support and pathway plans, the permanency of placements and a reduction in unplanned moves, and creative mentors. So we will be looking from the meeting tomorrow. We are discussing how we plan this out, and over the next few months before Christmas, we'll be looking at covering all of those 3 topics. We also spoke about the Children Care Pledge to review. This was sent out prior to the meeting for their feedback on what they think works well within it, what doesn't happen, and what needs to happen going forward. They discussed about looking at ways of raising awareness of the pledge, which included conducting telephone questionnaires and a suggestion for COVID-secure efforts to spread the word about the pledge in Children in Care Council in public places. This is something we will be looking at again at tomorrow's meeting about how we move this forward. Obviously, COVID restrictions have changed again, so we will have to re-look at how we do that. We also we had a discussion about an activity day over the summer holidays for the members to get together, which would also be offered to children and young people in care as a promotion of the Children in Care Council and to increase engagement. It was discussed about current limitations and difficulties booking, such as Laser Quest, which I know they've done many a time before, and we decided to look at outdoor activities like Lee Green, which would be more interactive and inclusive to all members. We had a discussion about the meetings from September potentially being face-to-face and how members would feel about this, which actually they were really keen to do that. I'm really happy to get back face-to-face. Throughout, when this report was being created, I co-produced the following ways to increase engagement with Children in Care Council, along with the head of virtual schools, deputy head of fostering, and head of direct services and children's residential services. So from September, I will be attending schools to meet with children in care, working together with the designated teachers for children in care, working alongside the virtual school to meet with children and people at activities such as cookery sessions, which we did last week, didn't we? And meet with children and people in foster placements individually where necessary to gain their views if they aren't able to attend the meetings. And to connect individually with children and young people under the care of Derby City Council but placed out of area, which currently we will look at probably doing virtually because we're in this virtual world now where you have the ability to do that and move forward. So that is certainly something I'm hoping to do moving forward, to connect with those that aren't placed in the city centre currently. We are looking at a review of how we consult with our members who have special educational needs and disabilities to ensure their views are captured in an inclusive and effective way, to ensure, obviously, we include everybody, and currently the ways in which it's always been done can't always connect with those that can't verbalise their own views and opinions. So I'm working with colleagues to ensure that we do that further down the line. With regards to care leavers, since writing the report, it's been decided the Leaving Care Service will meet with individual children care members, Children Care Council members, to discuss the way to move forward. Lots of ideas have been generated. The Leaving Care Service want to run these past the members first of the Children Care Council. And that is the end of my report. If there's any questions or anything anybody wants answering, please let me know.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Some really good work going on there, and really pleased to see the work that you're doing, particularly in terms of trying to include our young people with SEND. That's really great. Really, really pleased to hear that, and any support that you need, if you can just let us know. And again, with the pledge, once the Children Care Council have decided what they would like on that, again, if you let us know, we'd be happy to promote it and to make sure that we can get it as well publicised, and make sure that we all sign up and buy into what they've asked for us on there. I think it's really good. Hopefully it won't be as dry as it currently is. From looking at it, it is very dry. So I'm hoping that the young people will come up with some really innovative ways of sharing the pledge, but making it so that it's more easily accessible, but also easier to remember as well. So looking forward to that. So happy to open up for questions from the floor. Yes, Councillor Grave.
Thank you, Chair. And I do agree that I very much appreciate the work that's been done and the liaison with the young people. Now, the first one, some of us last night attended the CYP meeting, which a very lengthy report on kind of joined up support for mental health was raised. And I suppose my question would be, are there any discussions with the young people about their feelings on how mental health issues are dealt with? given the fact that in the report it told us that children in care are 4 times more likely to have mental health issues along a spectrum, obviously.
Thank you for that. So currently, the meetings that I have been a part of in the last few months, that hasn't been a discussion we've had openly, but it's, again, something I'm keen to have discussion about, because thoroughly agree about, you know, the issues that children in care face around mental health are a lot higher, and it is certainly a concern for us all. So it is something that I will certainly I will actually put it to the group tomorrow night when we have a discussion about the coming months' plans. So yeah, I will take that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we're all reassured by that. I did have a follow-up question, if that's all right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to assure Councillor Hazelgrave that in terms of consultation with young people, especially looked after children, that forms part of all care planning processes and assessments that's undertaken with the social worker. If you're not currently familiar, and I was going to raise this as any other business, to draw the committee's attention to our recent Ofsted inspection, our focus visit, that was very positive and actually outlined some of the areas around emotional health and well-being that Ofsted actually found in terms of the case files and their discussions with young people. So absolutely, this it's part of business as usual to ascertain views and assessments of young people's emotional health and well-being. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sue-Ann, for that. The other question really is about care leavers and how they are given the wherewithal to connect with everyone, but also how they can kind of keep in touch with what's happening and get more control in a positive way of their lives. And what I mean is, for example, are they given a tablet or a laptop by the council to facilitate communication, looking for work, sorting out issues, etc.
Of course. Yes, as part of the COVID plans, the government rolled out a scheme to provide laptops to care leavers or care experienced young people. And we've had laptops disseminated to a number of our care leavers, and we're in the second tranche now, so that's going on. And that's augmented by our communications allowance, so young people receive a communications allowance each month to make sure they're well connected with their peers, their social networks, and with any kind of members of staff or professionals. So there is kind of good opportunities for young people there.
I think that's very good news, Chair. I'd also ask that maybe NEETs are considered as people who might be included in that rollout, if that's possible.
Sorry, could you just clarify that, Paul? Sorry.
NEETs, not in education, employment or training.
Sorry, you threw me there, Paul, for a moment. Yeah, NEET.
Shall I pick that up? They're not, because actually they're not in education, employment and training. But what we've tried to do is work with our training providers, and it's almost been almost a carrot to get young people to engage, that actually if we can provide them with the right equipment and those sort of things. So it's very much on our agenda to focus on this year.
Can I just come back? Just that I know that there's some really good practice in other councils who've rolled out, and this might have been prior to the whole thing of COVID, etc., rolled out laptops or tablets to NEETs, and they've found that it's increased engagement, strengthened communication, and all sorts of things, and obviously gave them more autonomy over looking for work, etc., exploring courses. So it is an example of good practice in another council, but I can't remember which one at the moment.
When you remember, will you let me know, please? Thank you, and we'll explore it.
Yeah.
I've got a plea. Could you please pass on to the Children Care Council when you meet them tomorrow? Sue-Ann just mentioned we have actually had a focused visit from Ofsted, and I have to say a massive thank you to the Children in Care Council who took part in that focus visit. It's really not easy sitting in front of an inspector. I absolutely hate it and I go to pot. But they were amazing. They did so well. But on top of doing so well there, the outcomes from that inspection were really positive, about them, but also about their role that they play in corporate parenting. So if you could please pass on to the council my thanks, and also the thanks from the committee, because, you know, without them, we wouldn't be doing our job properly. So really appreciate what they've done, and to actually be in front of inspectors at such a young age and to totally talk about their experiences and to be really honest with the inspectors takes a lot of courage. So I really appreciate that. If you could pass that on from us. Thank you. Thanks, Ira. Okay. So if I can quickly swap in between my screens, which I should be used to by now, but I really aren't. My English isn't very good either. The next item then on the agenda, if you allow me, I'd like to bring up item 11 to the next item, which is the annual fostering report. If that's okay with everybody, I'm going to ask Judy if you would present that for us, Judy.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. Thanks for moving things around. It's just I know that I've got to make a quick getaway at just before 3, so I didn't want to be left rushing and not have time to answer your questions. So it's quite a lengthy report, which I hope people have had time to read, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end. But I just thought I'd pull together just a few of the highlights rather than go through the whole report for you again. So I've just put together just a few points, really. So in the year from April 2020 to March 2021, we managed to maintain, if you like, a similar number of approvals that we would have done had we not been in lockdown. It obviously did have its challenges, but all our assessments, our panels, everything was able to continue virtually during lockdown. So we had 24 new fostering households that were approved and 21 deregistrations. So it was actually a net gain of 3. And that is against the national trend in lockdown. Most local authorities have had a loss during lockdown, and we've managed to stay relatively stable with that. What we have been focusing on more recently, though, rather than, I think in the past we've perhaps, it's all been front end and there's been a lot of emphasis on getting new people in. And what we're trying to look at now is better utilising the skills of the foster carers that we've already got. And I think that's had quite a dramatic impact really over the last year. So at the start of the year, we had 83 placements that we were able to offer from our existing carers, and by the end of the year we had 104. So our existing carers were able to offer, you know, a wider range and for more children, and Marlene's an excellent example of that because she took on a sibling group of 3 for the first time. So, and the reason we were able to do that is because we relaxed our approval status for foster carers. So again, in the past, we've tended to have quite tight approval ranges. So somebody might have been approved for 0 to 3 or 11 to 15, 11 to 16 or something like that. So what we're doing now, we're trying to encourage all foster carers to think about having the approval range of 0 to 18 and also how many children they could actually foster. Not saying that they've got to, but just, you know, in circumstances if we needed them to, could they foster 2, 3 children, and could they widen the age range? So what we're in the process at the moment of going through in the foster carers annual reviews, re-looking at that, and gradually the approval ranges are increasing, and we are seeing an impact on that with the placements that we've been able to make. The other way that we've increased the numbers of foster carers, or what we can offer, is that we've set up a parent and child scheme. I think I might be about to mention that on the next slide, so I've jumped ahead of myself there. I'll cover it now, though. Now I've started. So we've also, again, from our existing pool of foster carers, we've added additional training for them so that they can be approved to take parent and child placements together. And in the past, all our parent and child placements, we've had to use IFAs. So we've now got, I think, 10 foster carers who are able to offer that type of placement, and they're coming through panel at the moment in the next few months, so hopefully we'll start to see that having an impact as well, and it'll mean that we can keep those parents and children local to us as well, rather than shipping them off, you know, a long way away from their support networks. The Payment for Skills panel, which is our, I think it was about 2 years ago that we set up the Payment for Skills panel, where carers were paid for their knowledge and skills rather than for the children that they had in placement. So rather than it being child-led, it was led by the skills that they'd managed to acquire themselves. So there's a lot of training that we're able to offer to foster carers. And again, during lockdown, I think the feedback we've got from foster carers is, although they've missed face-to-face training, it's actually been easier to access the virtual training. It's been more flexible, and you know, sometimes we've been able to offer them a training course that they've perhaps watched, like a webinar or something, where they perhaps watch it in the evening when they've got more time, rather than trying to get the foster carers to fit in with our schedule, if you like, and do it when it's convenient for us. So I think going forward, the training will probably be more of a hybrid, some face-to-face, but quite a lot of virtual training as well. So yeah, our foster carers are moving through those bands, and the impact that that's having is that our carers that are on the higher band levels, so on band levels C and D, are now pretty much comparable with the payments that they'd be getting in an IFA placement. And so what we're finding is that we're getting more and more inquiries now from people in IFAs who are wanting to come to the local authority. So that's ongoing really, and we're seeing an impact in that each month. I think that's that slide probably. Okay, so the other major thing that we've done is restructure the fostering service to form a new family and friends team. So in the past, the recruitment and assessment team did all the assessing for mainstream and for family and friends. And the trend at the moment, if you like, is that we're getting a lot more inquiries for family and friends foster carers, and they need to be responded to straight away. Often they're in the court, well, they're nearly always in the court process, so they can't wait. And what that means is that mainstream foster carers would sometimes have to wait because the family and friends have to take precedence. The other thing as well is that we feel that for family and friends carers, they really benefit from having the same social worker that they've had assess them, then support them. So this new family and friends team, it will be a lot better support, I think, for our family and friends carers. We're going to do specific training for them as well, and that whole service is something that's now starting to develop. So I'm trying to think when it actually started. I think it was beginning of June, 1st of June. So it's been running a couple of months now, and yeah, so that's a work in progress, but that's been the major change really. We've had new staff for that team as well. Sue-Ann managed to get additional funding for us, so we've got two new social workers in that team, and also the post-SGO support that was in the exit team has moved over to that family and friends team. I've talked about the parent and child. And then the other major thing that's happening at the moment is that we're working really closely with Derbyshire, Nottingham City and Nottinghamshire to look at ways that we can collaborate. At the moment it is a work in progress, but the one thing that we are sort of like moving on with, in fact that's wrong, I've written family friendly council, that's not right, it's foster friendly council. We're looking at becoming a foster friendly council, and the other local authorities are also looking at that. So hopefully then we'll be able to advertise as come to your local authority. We are committed to supporting, supporting you in your fostering journey. We're also looking at delivering skills to foster across D2N2, and also looking at potentially recruitment events where the push is like come and foster for your local authority. That'll be the message really that's going out there. I think I've probably covered most of this, but this is one of the dashboards that sort of shows how many inquiries we've had and how the increase has gone up in the number of inquiries and fostering households. So you could probably flick on past that. You can't see it very well anyway, can you? I like this one. Okay, so this is the one based in July, which shows the top line is the use of IFAs. And as you can see, that's going down and down and down. And the blue line is the mainstream foster carers, which is going up and up and up. And then the family and friends is the one that's on the bottom. So again, we have had an increase in mainstream and in family and friends, but the family and friends tends to bob up and down a little bit, whereas there's a gradual increase there in our mainstream and a gradual decrease in the IFAs. We're going to be starting in the next quarters as well, which I'll be able to report on next time in looking at financial savings for that, which we've not done so far, but we've got a system where we're going to try and actually put a cost by how much money we've saved through not using IFAs and through using like the parent and child placements and different initiatives. So the next slide, I think, is just where we're going next, our sort of developments. So one of the things that came out through Moxted really was we need to strengthen the voice of the child through better compliance and feedback from social workers in the annual reviews of foster carers. So at the moment, the compliance for that is sometimes quite poor. So we're trying to make it an easier form, and we've got different systems now for following that up, so that when they come to their annual reviews, we have got feedback from the child social worker and therefore the voice of the child in how they'd found that placement. We've got a new in-house placements officer who's based in commissioning, managed by commissioning, but will be working very closely with fostering, in-house fostering. And our duty system has historically been worked by a different worker each day. And what will happen is that Jess, who's the new in-house placements officer, will be duty every day. And she'll know what availability foster carers have got, and she'll build links with those foster carers and be able to talk about the children that are coming through. So we're hoping that's going to be much more efficient. I've talked about establishing the efficiencies through working with D2N2 and supporting locality services through the streamlined service for assessing kinship carers. What that actually means is that at the moment, SGO assessments are completed by our localities and family and friends are completed by the fostering service. But what will happen going forward is that the new family and friends team will do SGO assessments and family and friends assessments. Special guardianship order, so it's another way that children might live with their relatives. So it's just, rather than the report and the assessment that they would do go to a different place. So the fostering assessments go to fostering panel, and the special guardianship order assessments go to Andrew or one of the heads of service and then go through court. But what will happen is the report is very similar, and in the past we've had different people writing those reports, so now it'll be the same people writing the report, but it might just have a different outcome at the end. Yes, and then we're looking all the time at widening our recruitment events to reach a more diverse group of carers. So we're working with Adam Rapassa, who's the person who works with refugee communities. So we're working with him, and we're doing a specialist event at the end of September. And we're also looking at other ways that we can reach a more diverse group of carers. I think that's it for the feedback that I wanted to give you, but I don't know whether people have got questions from the report or from the statement of purpose.
Thank you very much. First of all, wow, you've done so much work there. Really, really impressed with that. I'm really pleased to see a lot of the new initiatives that are coming on. I suppose the point that you raised about the training and the schedules and being able to be flexible there, I'd be really interested to see if we can find that hybrid, particularly if it means our foster carers are being able to do more training and to reach that higher level. I think that's great. So I'll keep my eye on that one to see how that goes. The dashboard, I know you couldn't see it very well up on there. I've got a big screen in front of me, so I'm not being rude when I'm turning away from you to read it, but I can see it there. are really, really so pleased to see that the numbers of IFAs are coming down and our own foster carers are rising and our local carers are being used more. So that's going to have a massive impact on our children and our families as well. So really, really pleased with those different data sets there. So congratulations to the team. And I know how much hard work's gone on, particularly into the wider recruitment. And I wish you all the success there, because I know that it's been a real struggle over the years. But you know, to keep going and to keep thinking of new things to do takes a lot of imagination and strength and courage to do that. So I'm really pleased with that. So happy to open up to any questions there.
Just a comment really, but it's nice to hear a good news story from what's been happening COVID, and you know, there's certainly that improvement where we've recruited more people who are linked to the authority in terms of providing foster care. It keeps children local within the city. It keeps costs down for the authority. I mean, that's obviously an important issue these days. And I really like this thing where they're paid not by the bodies in the household in terms of who they're fostering, but in terms of what level of skills they've acquired and can therefore use, because that makes it a much better quality placement for any young person in that household. And also contrasts greatly with, I suspect, but I'm not sure, with the independent sector, who are probably just in it, kind of putting it, giving a higher amount of money, but not necessarily interested in developing the skills of the carers. So, I mean, I think it's a win-win for the children and for the authority. And I think you're doing smashing work here. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Grove. So, any more from the floor? No? Well, thank you very much for that. And hopefully, if you've not had a chance, if you could have a look at the appendices there as well. Would everybody be happy to accept the recommendation? Yep, fabulous. Thank you. Right, the next item on the agenda then is the item 6, the update report on children in care missing report. And Fiona, I believe you're going to take that for us.
It's going to be a joint effort, Yvonne, so I'll just talk to the report initially and then Kelly will take you through the slides. So really the report just reminds everybody that it's really important to have that comprehensive oversight of the most vulnerable young people who are having missing episodes. This report obviously focuses on looked after children, but on the whole, early help, the strategic responsibility for missing sits with early help within the council. I think it's really important to just remind everybody that the responsibility overall for missing and the protocol lies with partners as well. And, you know, we have a key relationship with the police as far as missing, and Kelly and her colleagues, along with the Derbyshire Constabulary, work very well together. The supporting information just gives the detail on what we've been doing, how we do it. 4.7 obviously refers to the number of missing episodes between January and June, and you know, there isn't a new story here. It remains the same, that there's still a lot of missing episodes from our own residential care homes, and there's still quite a lot of work for us to do with our colleagues in residential care to do something about that. What we do know is a little bit more around where they're going, and whilst I've jumped to 4.7, you'll note at 4.6, for the first time we can actually tell you that we know where young people are going, and there's a number of places in the city that we know young people who are missing are frequenting. I think what we've tried to do is to keep that information to feed into our once place-based risks off the ground and you know, the community aspect of that, but also using the services we already provide within early help. So our detached youth work, making our youth workers aware of those young people and those spots, and if they're in the area, to go and check out on those young people. As far as what we continue to do, and some of the questions, Councillor Williams, you had at the pre-agenda, Kelly will run you through the presentation, which hopefully addresses some of those. And if not, we're here to answer the questions. I'll switch my...
Has that gone through? Yeah. So I think some of the questions from the pre-meet I've just tried to answer in terms of what's on this presentation. So in terms of our definition of missing, we go by the Dfe guidance, but also we are governed by the policing definition of missing. So that's why we work in such close partnership with our police colleagues. And the definition of missings obviously have quite similarities within those. So the next slide. So the police go into a lot more detail around their definition of missing. So they break it down into these three categories. So you've got no apparent risk, medium risk and high risk. So no child is ever deemed no apparent risk. They'll always be deemed as medium and high risk in terms of trying to find them. Again, the police can only go by the information that is provided by the person who is reporting them as missing. So we do work a lot with our children's residential homes to ensure they are given the right information. So any child who is looked after who's deemed at risk of CE or significant mental health risk will often be given a high-risk status, which we've had quite recently, and high priority is given around trying to find them as quickly as possible. Yeah. So I think one of the questions that was asked was around our return interviews and what we learned from them in terms of what information we gather from them. So the general picture, which is often, if I'm honest, is quite hard with some of our looked after children. They don't want to engage in a return interview. But what we do gather is that most young people travel on foot or use taxis. They often remain local. So many will often go to families or they will congregate together in local areas. Many young people are not often found in a location where they've been missing, so they've become quite wise to that. So they will move around and then phone to be picked up. So yeah, and again, young people at risk of CRE will not tell us any details. So again, that's often one of the things around grooming, around CC, they won't tell you anything. So we do rely on our police intelligence, which is why, again, we concentrate and work really hard with our police colleagues, who can often do the pinging of phones and things like that for us, which we don't have the powers to do. Looked after children are often missing for less than 10 hours. Very rarely do they go missing for longer than that. Very rarely if we do. We have obviously our procedures that we follow in terms of pulling together a missing strategy meeting, and they're given the most high priority. Again, like with our ready children, they will go missing together. So there's often that pull factor and peer associations. And that is comparison to our non-looked after children who will often go on their own. And what we are often finding is they will often stay very local and go to something like the shops. So sometimes there is this issue that we've got to work with our residential homes around not necessarily reporting them straight away, but how they go and try and find them, locate them, or manage the risk. So if they've got a curfew, say at 10 o'clock, if they're not by 10 past 10, managing that risk. Is this just normal child development now pushing the boundaries, or do we need to be worried? And that's obviously looking at the case as a whole, not just that missing episode. Yep, next slide, thank you. And then in terms of our own, what we have learned internally, we do audits every quarter on return interviews, and that's across the board from looked after children all the way to our unknown children who aren't open to services. And like I've said, we often find there is a lack of engagement from the young person in completing the return interviews. we are doing a lot of work around trying to look at a different way of engagement. So we're not just going, we need to come and do a return interview with you, but it's more around that direct work. We are looking at the appropriateness of offering a return interview. So obviously with COVID, there's been a bit of variety with face-to-face or telephone. For those most high-risk children, we are saying, and we had been saying, and it has been done, a face-to-face return interview. The CRE checklist is always completed for every return interview, and what we have found is they are completed to a high standard. So what workers are doing, they're not just taking that one missing episode in its own entirety, but they're looking at the whole picture to look at that CRE. The factual and circumstances leading to a missing episode often lacks finer detail. So again, that's what we're just doing some training around, trying to get the workers to write names, addresses and locations in order for our police colleagues to ensure they've got the bigger picture, because every return interview goes to them as well. But also to help us do peer association mapping based around the place-based risk. So we want to go more down that way. All the workers often do a professional judgment and analysis of a return interview, and again that is to a high standard, so it demonstrates that they do know that young person. Action plans are completed, and that's in line with their looked after plan and their residential plan. But what we're finding through our audits is we need to focus a bit more on disruption, how we can minimise those missing episodes, and looking at the disruption techniques. We are finding return interviews are not always completed within timescales, and this is obviously within the report you can see just due to the sheer number of children who are reported missing. So again, that's where our training with our residential staff is going to place such a high focus around, is it always appropriate to be phoning them as missing, or is it a case that we need to balance that risk? Is it a case, like I've said, about them just missing that curfew, and do we give them that time? We're delivering that training with the police, so it's definitely a partnership. Sorry, the writing's very small. So what has been action? So during COVID, we have created 2 podcasts as training material, because we did recognise that for our new staff, we did used to do face-to-face training around the missing protocol. So we also needed to revamp it a little bit. So we did a podcast on how to conduct return interviews, which was all about promoting better engagement, how we can do direct work with children, and also for guidance for reporting a child is missing, and our internal protocols, so around holding strategy meetings if they've gone missing for more than 72 hours. And again,
could I just add, Kelly, at that point, the links on there, so if people want to access, if you've got access to the intranet, it is worth a watch, so that, you know, if you want to get more of an understanding of the work, the links are there for the podcast.
We also did those training materials, again, in partnership with our training department and the police. And then obviously on top of that, we do our quarterly audits to measure the quality of return interviews and measure the impact. And that's something that is frequent, and then we feed that back. So in terms of reducing the number of recorded missing episodes, we are looking in October this year, we're delivering virtual training to all of our internal residential homes, again in partnership with the police and the training department, around managing risk, when to report a child is missing, and also responsibilities of the residential staff and the police in terms of finding a young person. And I know I think Andrew has created the early help case management meetings for all our residential children in care, and we've got a rota with the missing team, and they all attend to look at specifically helping around the disruption techniques to try and prevent the frequent number of missing episodes. And then completing return interviews within statutory timeframes. That's something obviously we're very aware of, and we're looking at using the missing runaways team within early help to help the children in care, our children in care colleagues, in order to ensure that all return interviews are done within timeframes.
I think it's perhaps important to add to that we do need more capacity though, you know, and we have talked to Sue Ann about that. But that's us, thank you.
From my point of view, obviously in our previous there is a real issue, a safeguarding protection issue, then we know that our colleagues at the police can do that for us, so we're pleased to hear that as well. Glad to see in terms of the return to the sort of different types of engagement that you're trying to do. You know, I'm a youth worker by background and know that it can be quite hard to make engagement not boring, and so young people can actually express what they need to express and tell us what we need to know. So really pleased to see those different types going on there. But I think the most important thing that I've heard today is about the learning the new disruption techniques. We all know prevention is better than cure, so really pleased to see that there's been some more work and advocate put into those disruption techniques and bringing that into the training, particularly of our new staff. So whilst I know there's a lot of work to do to get those numbers down, I feel more sure having listened to that and pleased with what we've done there. So I'll also ask if we can get the slides distributed.
Thank you, Fiona, and your team, and we are very reassured, certainly the Chair and I are reassured by the work you've done to kind of conflate what you've said and put more detail on stuff. Yeah. I'm just a bit perplexed by 2.3 as the recommendation to ensure those looked after young people in out-of-authority placements are monitored and supported appropriately. Is that referring to people who we look after from other authorities, or how children in other authorities from Derby who should be living in Derby are helped? And that's obviously a very difficult thing for you.
It's both, really.
Right.
It's about young people who come into the city and, you know, if they're sort of, for want of a better word, hanging around with our young people, and that we're making sure that we're doing the right thing for other local authorities, and then getting that corresponding support where our young people are out of authority placements, and often that's children with additional needs, young people with additional needs. So making sure that we can get the right support from other local authorities. It's more straightforward if it's East Midlands because of our regional relationships, but once we've got children placed in, you know, more distant places, it's more of a challenge, and we are expecting, as we do for other local authorities, that they'll complete our return interviews on time. Yeah. That's the challenge.
Thanks. And Paul, if you remember from the last meeting, the committee did ask me to write to all the chairs of authorities where we have out-of-area placements to see if we can increase collaboration and see what other things we can do in terms of the local offer as well. So that's been done, so we'll wait and see how we can progress that as well on that one.
I think that's a really good move, and it'd be interesting for us to get feedback from, you know, the range of authorities we work with, which is, you know, geographically quite diverse, and see what kind of response there is, given the basis that we'll do our utmost to help their children. We'd hope the same for them.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question or two regarding teenagers who go missing and on return are not being cooperative. I was wondering, first of all, whether we look at any patterns that we can spot in terms of girls, boys, how often they go missing. And I'm quite anxious that there isn't an exploiter out there who they are meeting undetected without us knowing. And whether, if we think there appears to be a bit of a pattern, we get assistance from the police as much as we can expect. Because there's an added reason for us to worry about something. then I would expect police to delve into the issues and if need be, use their intelligence services as much as they can. Secondly, can we be reassured as corporate parents that as far as we know, there isn't a set pattern in the city that we are able to put our finger on, and feel that as far as we know, there is no organized group or individuals who might be at it without coming to our notice.
So there's a couple of bits that I was going to mention anyway. So the first point is you discussed the levels of risk. I don't know if you may be aware, forgive me if you are, but we've changed the policy recently in force so that any child that's at risk of exploitation will naturally come in at a high level of risk of missing. So whereas before they might be in medium because we thought we knew the risk that surrounded them from previous incidents, etc. Now they will immediately become high risk, and it will be down to the reactive inspector to review that and to make a decision as to whether that risk is lowered to medium or not based on the circumstances of that particular individual missing episode. The reassurance that should give you is that when the high risk, it opens up more a sort of high level of investigation, so you will naturally have a DI will review it, a detective inspector that will review it, and the CID will be allocated to do the investigations in addition to the uniform officers doing the boots on the ground kind of inquiries. It also means that the SPOC inquiries that you talked about around phones, obviously that needs quite a high level of authority, so that will come to myself as a goal commander or one of the others. And again, that would need to be sitting at a high level of risk at missing in order for that to be authorised. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of reassurance around that. Also, in relation to the stuff that you're talking about you know, a particular patterns or gangs, etc. So again, we've got obviously our we have a missing team now, you'll be aware, I'm sure, in South Division, but also we've got the central child exploitation team, so anyone is at high risk of exploitation, if they go missing, they'll pick that up and they'll have a trigger plan for those individuals. A bit of an update for you on that, we're currently, although we're very proud of our missing team on South Division, it was created in order to create better relationships with the children, to be able to monitor intelligence better and to be able to do sort of better investigations. And in addition to that, it was to take away some of the demand on the response officers who wouldn't be able to pick up those patterns. But as a force, we've sort of recognised that we do that in the South, but North Division don't have a similar, they don't have a missing team. So as part of the cost of policing review, we are looking at what we do in terms of missing. There's a few options, one of them being, and again, maybe a little bit of reassurance, is that missing becomes a central team, so North and South will join together, and within that we will also join the exploitation team, so we will therefore naturally have better sort of joint working between those departments. As I said, that is one of the options. It's been written by Crime Support, so we're waiting on the decisions made about that, but hopefully that should pick some of that up. And also just a bit more reassurance, we have obviously got a county lines team on the South Division, and some of those children that go missing are obviously at risk of being exploited through county lines, so through trafficking, being used as a young person that's vulnerable to selling drugs, etc. So again, they will share that information with our missing team and make sure that anything that we envisage as a problem will get picked up through the county lines team as well. So hopefully it should mean that all bases are covered. It's obviously really difficult because, as we've said, prevention is way better than cure. It is hugely demanding on police resources, and the move from medium risk up to high risk it's been troublesome in policing because it is so much more demanding when it becomes a high risk. And for you guys, it's, I'm sure, really reassuring, and what you would see is the right thing to do. For the cops on the ground, it's really difficult because it takes them away from a lot of other policing sort of requirements, but that's kind of how it is at the moment, and it's working okay. And as I said, we will drop it down if we need to, but to be honest, there haven't been that many experiences where we have so far. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of reassurance. And if anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I think it's probably important to recognise as well that, as Kelly talked about in the presentation, all young people were worried about workers would complete the at risk of criminal exploitation checklist, and there's a pathway that it follows. So that goes without saying, that if we're worried about a young person, that there's an expectation that the worker fills in that form to look at, from our perspective, what level of risk there is. Kelly, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Also, we do a monthly missing persons meeting. So anybody who has 3 or more missing episodes in 30 or 90 days, we discuss them, and that's where we look at the trends in terms of patterns, who they're going away with, and that's where we're trying to link into the place-based risk a bit more in terms of that peer association and mapping, especially for our residential children. Is there a time and a pattern that they're more frequently going missing, and therefore do we need to talk to our children's homes about putting in more resources around that to try and prevent them from going missing? So we are looking at that piece of work, and that is ongoing as well, to ensure that we know that bigger picture.
Thank you. Just sorry, there's one added question which I forgot to ask or raise when I spoke previously, and that is to do with drug tests on return. How do we know whether or not, while they were missing, they've not consumed or have had access to drugs or alcohol? Is there any way we can establish, because that would be a big indicator if they've come back and they've consumed drugs while they were away, or they've consumed alcohol, that would probably raise the risk level generally in terms of person being at risk.
That's a real challenge, because this is about a young person's freedom and you know, liberties. However, I guess what I would say is that workers, certainly residential home staff, etc., know their young people well. So if they got those concerns when a young person returned, you know, if there was a smell, you know, if a young person's been smoking cannabis, you can often smell it on them. If they've been drinking, you know, then that's recorded, and it's recorded on the social care system and fed into the social worker for that case. And I think from independent reviewing officer's perspective, and from Andrew's children in care teams, it's really crucial that we pass that information on, because that's a form of intelligence, really, but it is about us collating that information. So, you know, if you've got young person A coming in, and they're coming in regularly at a certain time, and they often smell of cannabis or those sort of things, it's about us raising that information with the young person's key worker and using our appropriate systems.
Because I mean, obviously, you can smell cannabis on somebody. If you can smell cannabis on somebody, on a child, or there is evidence that they've consumed alcohol, you know, from that, that would indicate that they've had access to an adult. Because otherwise, a young child or anybody under the age of 14, well, these criminals, I don't suppose they discriminate that much who they sell their cannabis to, but in a sense, you would think even the criminals would probably shy away from selling cannabis to a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old, and therefore there might be an adult involved who has helped out the child in terms of having access to alcohol or cannabis. That was the angle that I was trying to get at. Yeah.
It's about the skill in the questioning, really, and the skill of the residential home staff or social workers or even, you know, the person that does a return interview to ask those questions. And certainly we would be wanting to collect that data. You know, if we knew a young person or a group of young people were going to a certain spot and there was often a regular smell of alcohol, then we'd be wanting to look more at, well, what are the facilities around there? So, you know, if they're hanging around in Alveston near the Blue Peter, actually there's a couple of shops there. So, you know, are we talking to those shopkeepers? Are we using our police colleagues to support us to do that? And I think that's sometimes when you get, you know, that really good work from community support officers and our police colleagues that are on the ground, you know, walking around areas. Of course, children could smell of cannabis. That doesn't necessarily mean they've smoked it. They could have just been with somebody else. And, you know, it's about us asking the right questions at the right point to get the right information to move forward with that. And obviously that information is crucial. That brings a picture of that young person or that group of young people. And, you know, if you relate that to place-based risk, it's about, well, actually, where are the hotspots? Where are the places we're really concerned that there might be a shop selling alcohol to young people or whatever. So certainly all that information is really important to us.
I think the other thing to add to that is a lot of multi-agency meetings. There are some things you just can't impose on a person, so just technical testing without the court order or some other kind of legal imperative, really. So it does make it harder. That's why we have to kind of work in partnership and make sure the communication channels are really good.
I think if you look at our journey with missing, and you know, previous to me holding strategic responsibility, it was Andrew, and there was a lot of work done around us getting our processes, procedures and those sorts of things in place. That's really tight now. The partnership relationship with the police and those sort of things is really good. Now what we're focusing on is that intelligence, you know, and that's why we can give you so much more of an idea about, we do know where young people are going most of the time, not always, and we do know, you know, where those hotspots are, and we're now looking at those disruption techniques and those sorts of things, and that's the next bit of the journey, really. And you know, what I hope is that in 12 months' time we're sitting here telling you that we know even more of those sort of things.
I think that goes to show exactly why the skills that our staff have in terms of being able to use those different types of engagement is really crucial, and that skill level often gets overlooked, but it is a massive skill set to have, and we're very fortunate, I believe anyway, to have those skills within the council and within our partnership agencies as well, to be able to get that right information and that right data, to be able to analyse it and then use it intelligently. And I have noticed over the years that that pattern is getting much more sophisticated, very much intelligence driven, and that's to be welcomed, and it's about analysing that intelligence then and making sure that we can disrupt those patterns, that, you know, those techniques that we use get in at the early stages, so that we're not sitting here next year hopefully with, you know, such increased levels, but you know, I'm really impressed with the level of skill that I've seen from all the agencies, really, in terms of trying to use that skill set, which is a really difficult one to have. So quite pleased with that. So thank you very much for your question there. I think that's really pulled out some reassuring information, and again from our colleagues in the police, that assurance that we have used all of that information and are using it intelligently to help our young people as well, to give them that guidance and support, and to hopefully prevent further missings. So is there any other questions from the floor? Okay. So in terms of the recommendations, then we've got recommendations 2.1 to 2.3. Happy to accept those?
Could I suggest a further recommendation after the discussion we've had, which more or less says committee acknowledges and appreciates the interagency support on this, particularly by Derbyshire Constabulary?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any objection to that recommendation? No? Lovely. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Paul. Right. Thank you very much. Our next item then on the agenda is, I'll put my glasses on so I can actually see it, is update report on reducing criminalisation by children in care, Concordat, and the young people in care involved with the OS. Andrew, if I can hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. So, yeah, this is an update report on our Concordat arrangements, which are our multi-agency arrangements to prevent criminalisation and reduce risk for young people in care. It's something we've had in place since 2018, following a pilot in 2 of our homes in the city, internal DCC residential homes, and we've now rolled out across all homes. So I'm just going to pick out the main points from a quite detailed report that we've submitted. The Concordat vision, which shows custody as a last resort for children in care looked after children, is still the guiding vision for the multi-agency partnership around this project and this programme. And just in terms of the way this is led, we have a tactical group and a steering group, and then operational enhanced case management meetings, so 3 levels of intervention. And it's got a range of partners from Youth Offending Service, the local authority, residential service, CPS, police and residential services, and they've been joined by other partners. So Kelly and the Missing Persons Group are now part of the Concordat Tactical Group arrangements. We have the virtual school, we have health on board, and we've also now got the Youth Alliance. So it's a really strong multi-partner set of arrangements. The Tactical Group oversee the protocol and the action plan that underpins the protocol, which includes the 10-point checklist, which is the work that the residential staff should go through before they call the police when there's an incident of behaviour presentation by a young person in a care home. And then operationally, we have the enhanced case management meetings, which again are multi-agency but focused on individual children and young people. So you can see the outcomes of the pilots. So over 2021, over the last kind of year, there has been a hampering or a bit of a kind of obstacle because 2 of our homes closed at one point in late 2019, early 2020. One of those homes has since reopened, and there are plans for the other to reopen shortly. And we also had a small matter of a global pandemic to contend with. So most agencies did kind of retrench back to business continuity plans. However, back in October 2020, Sue-Ann led a steering group of senior managers across the partnership to reinvigorate the Concordat arrangements. And since then, we've had engagement from all partners. We've reinvigorated the tactical group and enhanced case management meetings. So I'm going to go through some of the things that we've achieved in the last year from the action plan, which are in the report. I won't go through every one of them, but pull out some of the key things, really. So we've relaunched some of the key communications materials. So we've got a Concordat leaflet that's been put together by all partners, and that's an appendix in the report. We've got the Missing podcast, which Kelly mentioned earlier, and that's around best practice in regards to return interviews, because a number of these young people that present with challenging behaviour, difficult behaviour, which could become criminalised, are those young people that also are at risk of exploitation and going missing. And so, you know, it keys into all those vulnerabilities. We've launched enhanced case management meetings, which is multi-partner approach to make sure there's a trauma-informed approach to working with young people. We're not just all calling the police straight away when there's an issue. We've got the input from a psychologist in those enhanced case management meetings from the Youth Offending Service. And we've got all partners working to a strengths-based set of paperwork that we've developed across the local authority and with partners. The Police Missing Persons Unit are part of the tactical group. They've also kind of sent out information and developed typologies of young people's missing patterns, so very detailed looks at where young people are going. That allows the residential staff and the partnerships working with that young person to put in place mitigating risk actions. We've also now got engagement from the Youth Alliance, which was something in last year's report that was a bit of a gap around young people not having something to do in their spare time. So social activity. The Youth Alliance now go into the residential homes. They're part of enhanced case management meetings and also part of the tactical group, so that young people who need that additional buy-in, that additional mentoring, get that from that service. We've got 2 members of staff from Kingsmead School going into the residential homes, which has proved really successful, and that's about engaging and mentoring with hard-to-reach young people that are further away from education. Funding's been agreed for that, and that is started again this week, so that's been extended. And as part of the Moxted deep dive pre the focused visit, we had a Concordat focus group which went down very well. Partners turned up, were really engaged, and there was really positive feedback about the strength of partnership working around this agenda. So the action plan remains in place. It's reviewed every 8 weeks. We've got that in the diaries of all partner agencies, and we'll be refreshing a plan come April 2022. And there are a number of kind of green and amber areas, so we are making progress despite some of the barriers caused by COVID and some of the homes closures. In terms of impact, we do have police data, YOS data and local authority data, which shows some of the impact. So from the police data you'll see on the report, the first table looks at changes in volume of recorded crime. What you can see is decreases in homes 2 and 4, but an increase in home 1. And home 3 was closed for part of 2019-20 and all of 2021. But when you take all the figures, there's an improvement of 67, just over 67%, in terms of decreased offending in all of the homes that we've got open, so really positive figures. The second table shows the number of recorded offences during 2021, broken down by type of offence. And what we can see there in this qualitative data is low-level violence, drugs offences, which tend to be congruent with previous years' finding from the Youth Offending Service in terms of our strategic intelligence, which shows the type of offences for all young people. So low-level violence is very prevalent. It's by far and away the most common offence for all young people known to the Youth Offending Service, and it is for children in care. And what that does is kind of spell out that these are young people that have had trauma, adverse childhood experiences, and often it's acting out, it's impulsivity, recklessness, and an inability to manage and regulate behaviours, which is why we want this trauma-informed, Concordat-based approach to try to manage these behaviours, really. There are a small number of young people that those that have read the report will see have got sexual offences. They tend to be low-level sexual offences, and they're dealt with by the expertise of trained staff in the Youth Offending Service and by staff in a commissioned service called Action for Children, who have therapists and staff trained to deal with that type of behaviour. Table 3 shows changes in terms of volumes of calls for service, and these are the things that trouble the police most, and I'm sure Sarah will attest to that. When the residential homes have got an issue, they'll call the police. But what we've seen from that data in terms of what the police have been able to pull from their systems is that all locations bar one home have seen reductions in calls for service. And when you aggregate that up, it's around just over 68% rather, in terms of reduced calls for service. There are caveats, as I've mentioned, in terms of home closures and some of those homes being only open part of the year. But nevertheless, they are a good set of data which does show some impact of the Concordat and multi-agency arrangements. And the last table there from the police was table 4 about calls for service by type. And as in most previous years, it's around missing children. So when that call for service goes in, by far and away, the most common is a child missing. And in some ways, it does show the strength of safeguarding practice in the homes that staff will kind of make that call when they have concerns about a young person. In terms of data from the Youth Offending Service, what that data has shown is we've seen a fewer lack in young people involved with the service and a significant reduction in offences. Again, I've got to put a health warning on that the COVID figures nationally around youth offending showed a kind of decline during 2020-21 due to the lockdowns. So that level of offending reduced by 91%. It might not always be that big in years to come, but it is a kind of huge reduction nevertheless. And a third fewer young people living in our DCC residential homes open to the service. In terms of more qualitative data from the Youth Offending Service, the type of interventions that were offered to look after children included mentors, interventions from neighbourhoods teams, fire safety, health interventions, knife crime police interventions. So a broad range of services going into those young people, really. The other thing is that the service has developed really strong relationships with the police and CPS and courts and defence solicitors, and we now have a triage system where any vulnerable young people who can be dealt with outside of the court are triaged prior to their hearing, and that includes looked after children. So we've been able to manage to divert some young people away. Even when they've been charged to court, we've had a second look with the CPS, and where it's appropriate and proportionate for that young person to have an out-of-court disposal, then that young person is diverted to what we call our out-of-court disposals clinic, where a multi-agency group, including the police, local authority, education staff, make a decision about the right outcome for that young person. And just in terms of Dfe data, this is something we have to submit every year, and the local authority does, and all the Dfe asks for is the number of young people that have committed an offence who are looked after. But what we do is have a deeper dive into that data, and when we've done that, what we've seen is that although there were 19 young people who committed offences in 2019-20, who were looked after, the numbers decreased by over 40% when we looked at 2021. So in total, there were 16 offences committed by 10 young people in 2021, and 6 of those 10 young people committed just one offence, 3 committed 2, and 1 person committed 4. So when we've looked back across the last 3 years, what we've seen is in 2018-19, there were 50 offences committed by looked after children, 2019-20, 45, and 2021, just 16, which is 64% reduction. Again, caveated by the COVID, but nevertheless, a really strong performance set of data. In terms of the severity of the offences, most of them are Gravity 2, Gravity 3. What that means is they're less serious offences, often kind of low-level assaults, criminal damage and theft. And we saw a reduction of 76% and 63% respectively for Gravity scores 2 and 3, and a 100% reduction in Gravity score 6, which is obviously far more serious types of offending. Others were more stable than that. So when we looked at the proportion of offences that involved violence by young people, looked after children it was 18%, whereas the reduction for all YOS clients was 1%. So there's a far greater reduction in violent offending by looked after children than the wider YOS population altogether. So what the data is saying is that we're bringing down volumes of offending and kind of the levels of aggression and violence from offending by young people who are looked after. In terms of challenges for the Concordat, there still remains some pressures from partner agencies, mainly on the ground around moving young people out of the city or into secure, when we've got kind of challenges around missing, around CRE, and this is about a trauma-informed approach. This is about local services for local children and wrapping services, so those described by Kelly and Fiona and described by myself earlier, and making sure we are trauma-informed. We can manage risk far better locally than we can 100, 200 miles away, and we've had painful experience of that with some of our cases of late. So we have those conversations in the tactical group, and all partner members at that level, at that kind of lower senior management level, are really signed up to keeping young people local, to managing risk locally, and keeping those good communication channels open. There's some risks associated with funding around the YOS clinical psychologist and youth wellbeing worker. They're key parts of this kind of work, both trauma-informed, but Sue Ann and myself have got this on the agenda of our Youth Justice Partnership Board, which is the local youth justice steering group. And we're also having conversations with the clinical commissioning group about whether we can extend after October 2022, which is when the funding is agreed to currently. Return interviews, we've spoke about those in some depth already, so I don't think I need to rehearse that any further, but just to say an ongoing pressure, and it's a statutory requirement, although I will kind of caveat that and say that the qualitative data and understanding around risk is really strong, I would say, in Derby. So social workers, early help staff, YOS workers know their young people really well, know their risks really well, and can articulate that really clearly and know what they're doing to mitigate that risk as well. And it is just a volume thing that catches us out sometimes. So in terms of next steps, we want to roll out Concordat to private homes in the city, because we do have a small number of our young people that are placed in external providers based in Derby. So that's something that we'll be discussing with the tactical group, because we'll need a real partnership buy-in to some of those homes as well. And some of those young people will be missing or kind of committing offences with some of our young people as well in the city. So that's absolutely essential. We're looking to develop something called the Cromarty model, which is a way of evaluating the impact of this on young people more broadly across health, education and other issues, not just offending or missing episodes. So Graham Ferguson's going to be leading on that, because he's done that with a virtual school, and that will be something we'll hope to report on next year and have in place by then. Homes managers are going to be attending police section meetings, so they've got that up-to-date information are included in that. So again, it's a key information and communication channel between the homes and the police around hotspots, place-based risk. And we're also assessing any gaps in existing provision for psychological and therapeutic services that's being led by health representatives on the tactical group. So we've got a contract with Action for Children that's being looked at and assessed to see what gaps there are and what can be put in place for young people. We're also receiving free consultation from the NHS through a company called Cordis Bright, who are doing some consultation with the partnership locally across police, health, local authority, YOS, commission services, around how we develop trauma-informed practice further in the city. We did make a bid for something called Framework for Integrated Care around a year ago. We weren't successful. Lincolnshire got that bid. But what we're having is free consultation with a potential further bid further down the road, but also some free advice and consultation and a report to look at how we do things and how we could do them better, free charge or low cost. And the virtual school have re-tendered their mentoring support, and that's just started as schools go back this week. So overall, in a nutshell, there are some really positive results in terms of impact and the data. There are still challenges, but the group are really brought into this at a tactical and operational level. It will always be a challenge for young people, but we are working in line with Youth Justice Board, evidence bases and kind of vision, and with trauma-informed practice. So that's the overview. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Andrew. So bearing in mind the caveats that you've put on that, for me it's really good to see that the reduction both in numbers but also in seriousness, and also that reduction in violence related with our looked after children as well, without those numbers being down. Really pleased to hear that more work's going on with the trauma-informed practice. That's absolutely showed its worth, hasn't it, over the years, and it's having a real impact. And in terms of the clinical psychologist funding, I think that's something that we need to take away and have a look at strategically, but also with our partners to see what else can be done there. So from my point of view, really happy with the impact that Concordat's having. Very successful. I'm glad we've done it. And you know, the work that's ongoing, the training that's ongoing, I think it's going to have an increased impact on our children and young people. So very happy with that, but always conscious of those caveats that you've given us. And I think we need to keep that in the back of our minds as well, and keep that refreshed. Happy to open up for questions. Sue-Ann?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add the exemplary partnership working and the nature of this particular framework, and that Derby is actually leading the way nationally. Certainly the Youth Justice Board, who oversee the youth offending services, have recognised this as exemplary good practice nationally and have highlighted this and put it on their website as a good practice example for other local authorities to follow. And you're absolutely right in terms of where this originated from. We had over-criminalisation of our children in care. And this was absolutely designed to reduce that and to bring together the right people to address that, which it has. And clearly it's grown since then, which is great. So yes, absolutely exemplary practice. Thank you.
Thanks, Swan. That's really good to hear, actually. And hopefully other authorities will mirror the work that's been ongoing, because if it can help our children, I'm sure it can help theirs. So that's really positive to hear that it's being shared. Any other questions? Oh.
Just looking at the challenges in 4.21, I'm sure we're all concerned that two, I think, important members of the team could be lost, particularly the clinical psychologist. And is it one post or two? Is it one clinical psychology post and one youth wellbeing worker? Or so you could lose two posts? Right, I do think we ought to have a recommendation such that we would be very concerned if those two posts were lost.
happy to put that in as a recommendation of concern, obviously for...
Yeah, I mean, how we word it, I
yeah.
think it should be noted that we have that concern.
Sure, happy to put that in as a concern there.
And then on 4.23, I think we may have kind of looked at this and been reassured in the previous item about, it's basically I've underlined whether the right resources are located in the right places for children missing from home and care. So that's part of the review, and obviously you've tightened up. So I don't think there's no point in putting a recommendation to that because we know it's been covered. But the last thing maybe, and it just needs clarification, on 4.32, I noticed that this is dated 2018 as a concordat. And you talk about a review of the concordat protocol, including the 10-point checklist, is due to be completed by October 21, so it's later this year. Does that mean you're going to put out a new version of the concordat?
Very little, in essence, Paul, very little will change because
yeah.
the framework is around,
yeah.
The framework is the framework. We just want to kind of take a relook at it to make sure
yeah.
it remains fit for purpose, because it's about what offences or what behaviours would not be appropriate for a concordat intervention. So that there are some things that involve weapons or more serious sexual offences which need to be taken to court, and then other low-level things which can be dealt with in-house. We'll take a look at it again and we'll update it just as much as anything to reassure ourselves, but in essence very little will change. The main thing that changes is the action plan, the underpinning actions to make sure that the work of the partnership continues to drive this, but the overall overarching protocol, it will be redated, relooked at, but little will change.
So in the light of that response, I was going to suggest the concordat will be updated, and a new version will be produced, but I think that's going to happen anyway, and it'll be dated October 2021 when we next see it. Yeah. And I suppose, Chair, we ought to, in the same spirit as the last item, recognise the work, the collaborative work, to keep our young people out of the criminalised, stop them being criminalised by the work from the CPS and Derbyshire Constabulary again. Yeah.
Just a quick comment on paragraph 4.24. We will be looking to extend the concordat to private homes where we have some children from the city. You're saying it might be a bit of a challenge in terms of getting them to accept that or sign up to it. But I was wondering whether we could actually put a condition in our own documentation that we will only place children with homes which have signed up to that concordat, because that would be within our powers to do that, and that will actually force their hand to an extent if they are resisting it. And I was wondering whether we could actually make some recommendation to that effect, that we must give some consideration to doing that, if that's legally doable.
So if I take my chair of the committee hat off and put my cabinet member hat on, I absolutely agree with what you're saying in terms of what should happen. My concern would be that that would limit us in terms of placement proficiency. So I wouldn't like to push us out of the market and not be able to have those placements. We can actually push and try and address those issues, but to change, to make a recommendation that would force providers to do that, I think it could have a detrimental effect on the proficiency there. Sue-Ann, would you like to come in there? Sorry.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's no statutory compulsion for private homes to take on this. I think what we can do is to commit to have the conversation and to be selling the benefits for that home. Is that something that we can do, Andrew?
Yeah, I think we can probably try that, bearing in mind Chair's kind of comments, which we know the kind of pressures and sufficiency for children in care. But we've had this before with missing. We've taken it to kind of private homes and they have engaged. It's not as easy, maybe it's the wording in the report, it's not as easy as our own internal homes where we're pushing it an open door. So I think we have those conversations and, exert a bit of kind of pressure, but also kind of sell the positives around what we've achieved in our internal homes with the private providers.
Can I come back in? I mean, we have a system in place for adults and people with disabilities. When we make placement in privately run care homes, they have to agree our terms and conditions of placement. Are we saying that we have got no terms and condition agreement with the homes where we're placing children in? And if we already have terms and conditions which are agreed by the placement provider, then in certain that I don't think is going to strain our relationship with that provider to the extent where they say, well, we want to pull out the contract, we will not contract with Dfe City Council. I don't think, and if a provider is actually feeling that strongly, then we could actually discuss that, but that would make me wonder what's in the concordat that the provider feels so strongly about that they are prepared to go to the extent where they are prepared to get out of contract with us and not have our children. I'm just wondering, that's the other way of looking at it.
No, I understand your concerns, but that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that we will have those ongoing discussions with the providers, but that it's not a legal requirement in terms of the commissioning of those places. It isn't something that you would have be able to put into the contract that would be legally binding. So doing that, I think the way forward would be the way forward that Andrew suggested, that we'll have those ongoing discussions. And the market is very difficult at the moment because it is flooded and it is very hard to make sure you get those right places. So I think we need to have those discussions, continue having those discussions. Happy to put that in as a continued discussions with the private providers to do that. Happy to put that in as a recommendation, but I wouldn't like to tie our hands, as it were, at this point, because it's not legally binding.
That's fair enough, Chair. I'll agree to us pursuing discussions with private providers to see if, rather than say, make it conditional. I'm quite happy with that.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other issues or questions that would like to be raised? So if I can take us back to the recommendations then, I'll zoom up the page, bear with me. So we got, in the report we've got recommendation 2.1, and then we've got the added recommendation, first one to recognise the collaborative work that's going on between all our agencies and with the team here, to express concern over the loss of posts, and then thirdly to continue to have ongoing discussions with the private providers on Concordat. Is everybody okay with those added 3 recommendations? Yeah. Great, thank you very much. We shall add those in. That's fantastic. Thank you very much, team, for that. And the next item then is item 8, Children's Rights Services. Kelly.
Hiya. Thank you for inviting us. Just some good news to start off with first. We were successful in retaining the contract again for a further 3 years, so that was very good news indeed. Joe's new on board as well, quite recently. So Joe is the manager for the Advocacy and the Independent Visitor Service. So I just want to give you a rundown really, and I know that slide's really small, so apologies. But just to give you kind of a lowdown on the Independent Visitor Service. So an independent visitor is that consistent individual who's independent that follows a young person whilst they're in care. So they meet with them on a monthly basis, go out and do nice activities, have that one person that they can talk to, communicate with, get a relationship with, so they've got that consistent person within their life if they've got no other family members or they're feeling isolated or alone. So just to give you a bit of a breakdown on the figures, so young people referred to the service throughout 2020-2021 was 13 in the year. We newly matched 12 young people with an independent visitor. Year-end ongoing relationships were 8, and then we have 28 which are less than 20 miles away and then more than 20 miles away. So just to confirm, 28 of the matches out of the 40 which we had matched throughout the year are longer distance. We had some referrals withdraw, and that was 6. Different circumstances, wasn't the right time for the referral. The other things were the young person had a placement move, so it wasn't appropriate, and then the young person changed their mind, so that was some of the reasons. We had 14 end in the year, which is a higher amount than normal, but again, I think that was due to COVID and lockdown and different reasons, various reasons for doing that, and that's the young person and the volunteer as well. And obviously we had 12 awaiting match at the year end, so we'd already got 40 matched, and that's the target for the year is 40, and we had 12 awaiting. So yeah, challenging time, but challenging time for all, obviously throughout this pandemic, and we had to change and adapt the way in which we do things around, you know, recruiting volunteers, training volunteers, interviewing, matching. So new independent visitors with young people, you know, maintaining those existing matches, and we saw it as kind of business as usual. So it was, how do we do this and how do we maintain that, not to disrupt the service or disrupt the young person and the independent visitor. So yeah, lots of ways, methods, different ways of working, i.e., you know, IT, technological, you know, Zoom, phone calls, pen pal writing. So we went back to basics to keep those relationships going. And we did that extremely well throughout the period. And like I say, we maintained numbers. Where we fell off, we rematched. We trained throughout the pandemic, be it, you know, via Zoom, Teams, different ways, very challenging, smaller groups. But yeah, you know, it was what we had to do. Some of the activities, there's a big list on there. I don't know if you can see them, but they're really, really small. But some of the things that the volunteers and young people got up to was writing letters and cards to each other, doorstop deliveries, so that was around, you know, birthdays, Easter, you know, that kind of thing. We also dropped off food parcels, McDonald's, resources. Amazon did very well out of us throughout the period as well. Some of the other things that they got up to were virtual movie nights, where we sent treats in advance, so we dropped popcorn off and did that kind of thing. We did virtual pamper nights, virtual jewellery making. And then when we could finally kind of meet and kind of join up, we did those socially kind of distanced bike rides, football games, walks in the park, albeit risk assessed PPE, you know, to the best of our abilities. Then we started doing picnics, visiting nature reserves, and you know, we did loads of other different varied, you know, we did like a woodland treasure hunts and things like that, and then we started to kind of get more and more when obviously venues and you know, different places started to open, you know, opened up different areas for us, which was a lot easier. There's a couple of quotes on there from the young people, on the volunteer, and there's also a YouTube link on there. I don't know if we can open that today, and I'm not sure if these slides will be sent out, but that is, if you do get a chance just to have a look at that kind of YouTube video, it just gives some views on a young person and a volunteer using the service, which I think is really beneficial. It's a bit of a joint effort, so I've done a bit of an IV update, and I'm going to pass over to Joe to do an advocacy update. You can. Thank you. Sorry, it's a bit small, isn't it?
Hi, so yeah, as Kelly said, I'm recent in post, July full time. So collating figures from last year into the report and a few slides. So with the advocacy side of things, so we have the independent advocacy, so issue-based, so that's more where the young people can refer to us, as well as social workers, foster carers, anything really, and we work around a child, the issue that that child's got, so that's more of an issue based, and we'll work with them to resolve that. So that could be, I don't know, one young person we had was looking for his savings that had gone through from one children's home to another, so it was something like that, or passports. So anything that you know, that young person feels that they need an advocate to speak on their behalf and to get things moving. Then the other side of the advocacy is where we attend initial child protection conferences and reviews. So we'll gather the children's feelings and wishes and then present them with the young person at the reviews. And again, we've had to do that virtually over the last 18 months. But hopefully that's now going to start coming back into face-to-face. So it has been challenging, because whereas we'd meet with the young person face-to-face, and it's better to gather their feelings and wishes that way, but it has been done via, you know, telephone or Teams meetings, and had really good support from the children's homes, schools where we can, if they're still attending schools, to help facilitate those meetings, and again foster carers and that sort of thing. It has been challenging, but we have, just from the slide, we've had 85 young people referred to us last year. Young people in Derby was 52, young people out of area or at a distance was 33. We completed visits to residential homes or via Teams meetings, it says there. Number of matters raised by young people was 81. Number of matters closed for young people was 77. So for us that, you know, we've been able to support those young people in their journey for whatever reason that they've come to us. And again, closed 31 cases. Referrals for the Child Protection Agency, so that advocacy, sorry. So that's about refer to the initial child protection conferences. So more people referred to that was 42, and the conferences participated in was 46. So that's either the initial or a review. Okay. And again, there's a couple of quotes on there. One's from a social worker in our locality too. So just nice comment there, as young person did not attend the meeting as planned. It was extremely helpful having our input. We managed to get a very helpful and detailed account of the young person's views, which was powerful and meaningful. There isn't anything I can think of that we could have done better, and I would recommend your service. So that was from a social worker. And then a quote here from a young person, aged 13. I like everything about my advocate. She is just proper nice person, always picks up the phone, and that's their words. So again, you know, we say it how it's said to us. Yeah, so yeah, that's it on that.
And just to add on to that as well, for those young people that are non-verbal or have got additional needs, we have done face-to-face throughout the period, but it's totally young person centred, so what they want. So if they're happy to do a phone call or a Teams or a Zoom, that's fine, but if they want a face-to-face, we've done that and we've carried that out as well. So yeah, just to reiterate on that as well. And sorry for these that have heard this before, but how we view an advocate is we have a balloon, and what we do, we put the young person in the middle of the balloon, and then there's a string, and then the advocate holds the string, and then all around the edge of the balloon is the professionals. So that's what we do. So we're holding that young person and supporting that young person, and then everybody else is doing what they need to do around the edge. So yeah, that's us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And in the words of the young person, that's proper good, that is. Proper. Love it. Just really interested in what you said about the letters. I know I have a teenage daughter, and during lockdown in particular, we encouraged her to write letters to her friends, even though she's on every day, you know, and with the internet and things like that. Actually receiving that letter really was so powerful and so emotional for her to actually have that come through the letterbox. It was like waiting for it. So it'd be really interesting to see if any of that continues now that things are going more back to normal.
You know, and it's going back to that old-fashioned way,
Yeah.
isn't it? You know, and we had a lot of the young people that were literally ringing and texting their IV. You know, have you sent it? Or I've sent mine. So they were doing the communication as well to say they'd sent it, received it, which it's lovely. You know, and we, you know, we've been monitoring all those obviously and keeping those. So we'll share those in the next kind of annual report and at quarterly reviews as well. So.
Yeah, I tried to describe how, as a teenager, my Facebook was actually being part of a pen pal club. Yeah, my daughter didn't quite buy into that, but it's really interesting, isn't it, in terms of receiving mail that isn't just a doctor's appointment or actually going to a meeting, etc. So, yeah, I think that's something that would be really interesting to see if we can continue, or even, dare I say, looking at the pen pal issue. It really sparked my interest then when you said you'd used it, so well done. Any questions from the floor there? No? So thank you very much for working with our young people and for being there for them. Appreciate that, and the challenges that you faced over the last 18 months and working out ways how to keep that advocacy going. So thank you very much. Thank you. Right. Right, the next item then is Children's Rights Services. No, sorry. The Independent Reviewing Service Annual Report. Pervez.
Yeah, that's me. Thank you, Chair. It's a statutory requirement for the manager of the Independent Reviewing Service to write an annual report which outlines the activity of the IRO service over the year. It's also guidance that report is then presented to the Corporate Parenting Committee for scrutiny. So what you've got in front of you is a detailed report around the activity for the IRO service over the year. The IRO role is a statutory role, which was embedded in the Children Adoption Act 2002. Every child that comes into care is required to have an independent reviewing officer. The requirement is that the IRO is allocated within 5 days, and that's in addition to a social worker that the child has. The IRO has two main functions. One is to chair statutory reviews, which have specific timescales. One is within 20 days of the child coming into care, then 3 months, and then 6 monthly thereafter, for the whole period that the child remains in care. And the other duty is for the IRO to monitor the care of the child, the young person, whilst they're in care. So you've got the Ira report, which, as I say, details a number of areas. I'm not proposing to go through each of those areas. Happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. But what I wanted to do was highlight some kind of key successes that we as an IRO services have had over 2020 and 2021. We've continued to undertake our reviews on an ongoing basis as per the statutory requirements, but those reviews have been virtual. So we've used Skype, Microsoft Teams, and continued to undertake those reviews, involve partners, involve young people, involve parents, and they've continued to be very successful. Over the year, we increased our complement by 1 IRO, and people will see through the report that we've had an increasing number of young people in care. Now, I wanted to kind of reassure the members of the committee that it's not just Derby on its own that's seen the increase in children in care. I was speaking to colleagues in the region this morning, and there's been a national increase around children coming into care. The reasons of that are many, but certainly in terms of Derby, it's been a consistent theme over the many years, year on year, and maybe it's issues to do with population, UASC's various issues, but the number of children in care continues to increase, and hence our capacity as RO service has to be increased in order to meet that demand. People have seen in the report that the caseload is slightly higher than the government guidance, and I'm pleased to report to the committee that I've got agreement to recruit an additional IRO, which I'll be doing over the next month. So hopefully that'll make a big difference in terms of bringing those caseloads down. In terms of, there's a number of measures that I use that look at the effectiveness of my IROs, and one of them is the timeliness of reviews. And again, I'm pleased to report to the committee that the IRO service was very effective in 2021, and we had 99% of our reviews on time, which was a significant increase from last year, which was 92. And as far as I understand, it's the highest percentage of timeliness of reviews that we've ever had. So really pleased with that. Along with that, the other key measure that I look at is the participation in reviews from young people. And again, I was very pleased when I was looking at those statistics that in 2020-21 we had 95.5% of our reviews where young people participated in their reviews. So they were able to give their views to the review and talk about, you know, what's been going on for them, what's working well, what isn't, talk about their care plans, contact and so forth. So that's really good. And we continue to work around that. And that was, as I say, quite an achievement because we've been using Microsoft Teams. So it's about involving young people through technology. And on the whole, as I've said, that's worked really well. And we've continued to do that over the year. The other main point that I wanted to kind of draw the committee's attention to is that over the last 6 months or so, the IRO service is focused around writing our reports in a child-centred way. So that's writing our review reports to the young person so they can understand why they're in care, what the main issues are for them, and what's going to be done in order to address those issues. And that's gone down really well in relation to the way that we write the reports. Really good feedback from young people, really good feedback from foster carers and other professionals, but also you'll be aware that we had a focused inspection from Ofsted earlier on in the year, and they focused a lot of scrutiny on the IRO service. They interviewed a number of IROs, looked at our reports, looked at our effectiveness, and the feedback that we got from them was very encouraging. They liked the way we were writing our reports, really pleased with the way that the IROs were chairing their reviews, really pleased with the consistency in terms of you know, the involvement that IROs have, how well they know the young people, and the support that they provide. And generally, as I say, very positive feedback around the effectiveness of the IRO service. That's all I wanted to kind of really draw your attention to. Happy to answer any questions or queries.
Thank you very much, Pervez. I'm really pleased about the way the report writing has changed. I think that is really important. So well done on taking that step and introducing that. And hopefully, I'd love to see that written for the rest of the council reports, never mind just for the IROs. I think it's really important. But do we have any questions for Pervez and his team? Hopefully you can see the appendix there as well. Any questions? Sue-Ann?
It's not a question, it's just a comment, and I'd just like to draw the committee members' attention to the picture on the actual report, because that's one of our young people who has actually designed that, and it's very, very good.
Yeah, sorry, I should have done that. Had that in my notes as well. But yeah, fantastically talented young person. So thank you very much for drawing that to our attention, Sue-Ann. If there are no further questions, can I take the recommendation at 2.1? Is everybody okay with that? And I totally apologise for my chairmanship and my running slightly over time, but we are on our final report. If I can ask Sue-Ann to come in and give us our final report, please. Thank you.
I'll take this fairly quickly, Chair, thank you. Another positive report, it's the Adoption Agency report of 2021, and it reflects a really busy year for adoption, but again, incredibly positive. So, like the IRO service, this is a statutory requirement to have an adoption agency report, and actually the local authority are required under a number of different pieces of legislation to provide an adoption service. We have split that in terms of the adult part of adoption services in 2019 with the creation and collaboration work with Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire of the Adoption East Midlands. And they oversee the adoption matching, the recruitment of adopters and subsequent support. And their annual report is at Appendix 1. However, for the purposes of today, I'm concentrating on the children, of which the local authority still maintains its existing responsibilities, and this hasn't changed. We have a small but dedicated team called the Children's Permanence Team who specialise in this area of work, and I'll be covering the timescales and performance of our adoption scorecard. Also to note that the role of an agency decision maker who makes those decisions around whether or not a young person should be considered for adoption and for all matches of adoption is retained by the local authority, and there are two agency decision makers for Derby City. One of those is myself and the other is our Director of Children's Services, Andy Smith. So you'll see from the young person's summary on page 1 that we have had a significant number of adoptions in the last financial year, 31. And I should have caveated that by comparing it to last year, which was 19. So we can really see the impact of adoption and the pace that we've had on adoption. And to note that COVID hasn't necessarily affected that. We've had a further 46 that we considered was in the best interests of those children to be adopted. And again, in comparison to the previous year, which was 37. We've had 52 matches, and there's been equal balance of both girls and boys in that, of which 42 of those adopters were recruited by Adoption East Midlands, and again that's in comparison to 21 the year before. And at the end of the year we had 32 children living with their forever families, and that was in comparison to 15 the year before, so we've done really, really well. Okay, so then if we move on to the supporting information that provides a detailed breakdown of the adoptions, age and data that we're required to submit to central government, and that's called the adoption scorecard. And again, we've performed overall very well. So in terms of indicator A7 at the top in page 3 for children adopted over 5 years old, and this becomes harder and harder the older a child gets. Our average over a 3-year period is 22%, but in the last year it was 25.8%. So both above the comparator and national average, which is good. That's good outcomes for children. It's the right outcomes in those cases. The next indicator is A6, which is the percentage of children adopted from black and ethnic minority heritages, and that actually accounted for almost half of our adoptions in 2021, and we're above the national average, but we appreciate that when averaged out over 3 years we do remain lower than the regional and comparator. Last year actually was very, very low, with only 3 out of the 19 that came from a BAME heritage, and that represented 15%. Page 5, if we turn to in terms of timeliness of children entering care and then placed with their adoptive family. We can see that the timescale has increased slightly by 29 days, but if you look over the number of years, we can see that we have been steadily improving. And we expect to maintain and be in line or below our comparators and national average when that data is available. A2 shows the positive performance in terms of Adoption East Midlands matching and placing timescales. Page 6 outlines the numbers of new plans and matching and respective ages, which again is positive. So in conclusion, I'm not bringing any concerns into the attention of the Corporate Parenting Committee. I think that this has been a positive year despite COVID, and we are looking forward to another fruitful year this coming year. So I invite the committee to endorse the report at recommendation 2.1 as set out, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Looks like the adoption East Midlands is having an impact for us, so really pleased with that. Any questions from the floor for Sue-Ann? No. So can you all accept the recommendation then, please, at 2.1? Yeah, great. So thank you, Sue-Ann. So, ladies and gentlemen, despite my really bad timeliness in chairing, I want to say thank you very much for attending today, and hope to see you all again in person. Hopefully not in this room, because I don't know about you, but I'm really feeling seasick at the moment with these walls. Oh, totally buzzy. But thank you very much, and take care. Stay safe. Thanks.